So we're back. We're back here again, same spot, and we are joined again with Ami Luttwak, the co-founder of Wiz and also the CTO of Wiz. And we're going to continue to talk about some of the Black Hat research here and Las Vegas that you guys disclosed.
Yeah.
And why don't you just get people give people a brief overview of this of your research that you disclosed.
Yeah. So our research team is focused on finding unknown vulnerabilities and attack paths in the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. So on this research, our goal was to what we call break the isolation, right? Because cloud and any virtual environment is all about isolation. I assume I have a tenant and no one can access my tenant, read from it, or write data into my own environment. We tried to say, let's see if we can break that. Can we write or read data into an environment that is fully isolated?
Fully isolated.
Yeah.
So this would be from the vendor's perspective, or from somebody who's in that environment.
So it could be. So basically, I'm a customer, right?
Yep.
I have an AWS environment. Let's say I would isolate it completely, no internet access, nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a way for someone to actually read or write data from that environment?
Okay. Well, I hope not.
So we were looking for new exposure paths in cloud environments, and we found a vulnerability, I would say a series of vulnerabilities, but actually we believe it's a new class of exposure that's not going away. It's actually becoming more and more spread that we need to know about. Mm-hmm. And the point is this: when you look at an environment, right, there is some exposure paths that everyone knows about. For example, an exposed S3 bucket, right? We all know if you have an S3 bucket, it can be public. Mm-hmm. But there is another exposure that no one talks about, which is the following. I have a bucket. I give access to a service in AWS.
A service within AWS.
Yes. For example, let me give you an example. There's a service called CloudTrail. This service collects logs and writes them to a bucket. Makes sense, right? It's actually a pretty cool feature. Now, if I have a lot of accounts, CloudTrail has a really cool feature to write the logs from all of those accounts to that bucket.
Okay, so multiple buckets,
multiple account logs into one bucket.
Into one bucket.
It makes sense, right? If I have 1,000 accounts, I want all of the logs to come to one bucket.
Got it.
But what's interesting is that this bucket, you would agree that this bucket is not private anymore, because the service is accessing it and writing data from multiple accounts.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, what was interesting? So first of all, this is something that the industry doesn't understand yet. That if you have a private bucket and you mark it as private, but you give service access to it, it's not private anymore.
Well, yeah, no. Well, that's a scenario that plays out in a lot of different scenarios, whether it be cloud or client.
And then we ask the question: wait, CloudTrail can write into a bucket from multiple accounts. Where does it say which accounts? What does it say? And we started looking into what is called a resource policy. Resource policy is what defines who can access the bucket. And all it says there is CloudTrail. So we thought, does that mean that there's full exposure, that I can write into your bucket? That this is actually a vulnerability into a fully isolated account?
So there would be no permissions that would prevent you from writing into my bucket?
No, because you gave permission to CloudTrail. You see, it doesn't say which accounts.
That seems like a pretty fundamental request for CloudTrail.
You're right. So it's and what we found is that it worked.
So you were able to use CloudTrail, but now is the culprit CloudTrail, or is
exactly? So then we said, is it just one service that had an issue? And then we showed it on AWS config. And then we said, okay, cool. We are writing into accounts. That's cool. But can we leak data from accounts? Which is even cooler, right? Because if you have a cloud environment that is connected to your on-premise and you can leak data from there, you can basically maybe even take terabytes of data with no trace. That would be amazing, right? Amazing for attackers. So we found another service, which is called serverless repository, right? Serverless repository is a service that hosts, it's like a registry, right? So it runs serverless functions and has a feature to read the code from a bucket. Read the code from a bucket. We looked in the resource policy. What does it say? Serverless repo can read from the bucket. Then we ask the question, which serverless repo? Where does it say which account? And then we said, let's test it out, right? So we tried to read from a customer account, right? Using serverless repo, and it worked.
So whose services are these, and why aren't they locked down?
Okay, so it's actually becoming more and more common in AWS. Almost every week you see more services that have cross-account capabilities.
So these are AWS services.
It's AWS services.
They're not third-party services.
No, it's AWS services.
Okay.
And they're adding cross-account capabilities because the strategy in AWS that it is more secure to have multiple accounts.
Yep.
So these are actually really cool and very important features, like CloudTrail collecting logs from multiple accounts. That's perfect, right? But the problem is that, I agree with you that this is a fundamental problem, is that when you provide access to a service, this access should be restricted, and it's not.
Well, what does AWS have to say about this?
So we worked with them. We disclosed the vulnerabilities. We have several more vulnerabilities on the path because there's many services susceptible. It's not. This is why I say it's a new class. This is not one vulnerability or two. There's probably many, many more. So the AWS team were great. They fixed the vulnerabilities and they added conditions. So basically added scoping, right? So when you use serverless repository, you can say only use this service, this account. This is my account that I allow. But we thought it's over. That was around January. We thought it's over. Then a few months after, we checked. We thought okay, everything now is fixed, right? We checked, and we saw 90% of the serverless repository buckets are still vulnerable.
Okay, what's going on there?
Exactly. We said it doesn't make sense, and then we started thinking about it, and we understood the entire process of cloud vulnerabilities is broken. Why? Because when AWS fixed it, what did they do? They added a condition, right? But they don't know which accounts you actually want to use. So they didn't actually put it into the bucket for you. You have to do it.
So it's they're putting the onus upon, and they perhaps rightfully have to put the onus.
Yeah, they have no choice
on the bucket owners.
But the bucket owners, they don't understand. They probably didn't read the email.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. And the cloud security team doesn't know about it. This is like, there's so much things in cloud. This is a specific vulnerability that we found,
So let me guess, and I'm going out on a limb here. Amazon doesn't see this as a security vulnerability. It sees it as a configuration issue.
So first of all, obviously, it's a configuration issue, right? And I think, again, the AWS team understands this is a problem. That's why they're adding a lot of services for alerting customers, right? They sent alerts here to personal health, which is, it's a service, but like security teams don't know about it. So now they're also adding services like Access Analyzer for security teams. Mm-hmm. But it's not enough. It's not enough. Like we understood there's a bigger problem here.
Okay, so do other cloud services suffer similar types of problems, or is
it's even worse than you think. What happens is that like every few days a new service becomes cross-account. So a vulnerability, even in an environment that doesn't have vulnerability today.
Hold on. A new AWS service?
Yeah, AWS service.
Okay, but what about other cloud platforms?
So, okay, that's a good question. And by the way, that's a part of our next research task.
Okay.
We believe this is like a much wider problem. But even within AWS, you can have a service that doesn't have any cross-account, so there's no risk, right? But then next week, it adds a cross-account capability. So your existing environment becomes vulnerable because a new feature was created.
So I mean, I feel like the floodgates are open. I mean, if you have a proof of concept in terms of how this is done, why aren't people exploiting this left and right? And why aren't we seeing this in the headlines today?
So that's a good question. First of all, it's not so easy to exploit, right? Because even though it's possible, you need to know my bucket name, and you need to know the file names within my bucket, right? Okay. So there is some challenge to exploit it. And even the attackers don't know about it yet. So, like, again, the industry is young. So also the attackers are still young in this. But basically, this concept, and I think, again, what's important also for the industry, the concept of exposure via services is just going to be more and more prevalent.
So let me just back you up. The prerequisite for this type of attack is what again?
Is that you as a customer use the AWS service and give it access to your resource.
Okay, you give it to your resources. And then what does the adversary need to do?
Needs to know the name of the resource.
Needs to name the name of the resource?
Because I tell
so they have to know all the names of all the resources.
They need a name. What we call is basically you have to somehow enumerate or find a way to find the customer name. And there's attacks that do it, right?
Okay.
You just have to combine a few attacks together.
Okay. Well, like all your great research, you have a wonderful write-up on this on your website.
Yeah.
And it is a very complicated topic, and I don't think we're giving it justice, but we're giving people a little taste of your research and what you guys have been disclosing here at Black Hat. And I want to thank you very much for your time once again.
Great to be here, and I would add that one last comment.
Okay.
We understood that there is a big problem here in cloud vulnerabilities, and what we are starting and actually calling everyone is helping us create a database of all of those vulnerabilities in the cloud as a joint database, because it doesn't make sense that only our blog readers and the viewers of the video would know about this vulnerability. We need to somehow create a cross-cloud database of all vulnerabilities from all vendors, and that's something that we need everyone to be a part of.
Okay. Well, we'll be talking about that next time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.